What's up, dudes? Max here, back with a huge update for Dragon Ball FighterZ. Some good news and some not so good news, depending on how you're looking at it. And today I really wanted to talk about that in this video. My apologies that this is a little late. I'm still back from TwitchCon over the past couple of days, and I've been fighting off something that's been building up for quite some time. And it's kind of the nature of things when I go to events, and I'm glad to do it. It's just I've become patient zero for some ridiculous sickness, and I gotta fight it off every time. But we have a moment now, so let's talk about Dragon Ball FighterZ with the huge update. First things first, the release date of the game has officially been announced. You know how we were saying that the earliest part of February was going to be nuts? The fact that the Japanese version was going to come out, we might need to import the Japanese version? Well, we don't even need to do that, because Dragon Ball FighterZ is launching on January 26th. Actually, it's even technically January 25th at midnight, so like 9 o'clock Pacific time on January 25th, which is great freaking news. I'm even surprised that the game does not have a worldwide release date between all the different regions, but for the most part, I'm very happy that it's launching in the Americas on January 25th technically, and I'm absolutely looking forward to something in January, despite the fact that there's a whole bunch of other stuff in January like Monster Hunter World and Dissidia and what the hell's going on. There's a video game apocalypse happening once again. So that's absolutely the good news regarding this entire situation, and the more questionable news was an update in regards to Dragon Ball and its post-launch support. This is confirmed that this is actually post-launch, that this stuff will not be available in the core game at the beginning of the launch of Dragon Ball FighterZ, but the announcement was for a total of 8 playable characters that were going to be added to the roster of Dragon Ball FighterZ at some point after launch. And this kind of falls into the same bucket that a lot of other practices usually do, where the DLC for a fighting game is being announced and sort of like talked about and promoted even before the game's launch, and we don't even know what the characters are. All we get is that the fighters are going to come with their own respective stamps, lobby avatars, and specific colors, and the actual characters themselves will be announced at a later date. So it has been confirmed that post-launch, the Dragon Ball FighterZ title or platform is going to be getting multiple new fighters and multiple more updates going forward, and this is absolutely nothing new for fighting games. It's mostly the way that it is technically handled, because it is DLC that is being announced before the game, much less we do not even know what is in it. The other really weird part is that the collector's edition of this game, which comes with a statue and everything that's like usual in collector's editions, runs at about $140 and doesn't even include the Fighter's Pass, which is really weird to me. I don't know and understand why the heck that is that way. It's just a very odd decision nonetheless. Now, a ton of people are freaking pissed about the Fighter's Pass being announced way before the game's launch, and I do sympathize with you guys. This stuff is much more prevalent with a lot of different fighting games, pretty much since the last few years or so. This sort of habit of announcing things that are going to be ready for the game before the game is out sort of makes people think that, man, why couldn't you just delay the game to add that content down the line? However, the counter-argument to that is usually that the budget for the game is only sustainable for however many characters are going to be in the core roster, and then beyond that goes into technical, like, post-launch budget / DLC budget, so it's a completely different thing because they essentially need the launch of the game to support the cost of DLC development down the line. But to the eyes of consumers and a lot of people that are kind of sick of these practices, it doesn't really matter. It just leaves a really bad taste in everyone's mouth. I personally am really excited just for the fact that Dragon Ball FighterZ is going to be getting post-launch support so quick. All things considered, though, it's an Arc System Works game. This is how it has worked for almost all of their games for the past nearly 2 decades, starting with Guilty Gear X, going into Guilty Gear XX, and the multiple different versions that game had, even going forward with BlazBlue, and then we have Guilty Gear Xrd. This is kind of the nature of that business. This is kind of the nature of those games, and the fact that Dragon Ball FighterZ is going to be included in something like that, of course it is. I didn't think they'd actually go in the Season Pass route. I knew there was going to be a few DLC characters or something of the like, but the fact that they are doing a proper Season Pass, meaning that those characters are not going to be available all at one time, there's a very good chance that they're going to be added sort of like 1 or 2 at a time, or maybe 3 or something. As the game goes forward, we're going to get a drop of characters and maybe a big update. probably within a year after the game's launch, I'm assuming. And then most likely in the span of that year in 2018 or so, Dragon Ball FighterZ will get another titled update in which you will be able to purchase a new version of Dragon Ball FighterZ that'll include all the Season Pass characters and all the content that it did have, probably for a price that was even cheaper than the base game cost. And that's kind of just how it goes. It's the same thing with Mortal Kombat, it's the same thing with Injustice, all the Warner Brother NetherRealm fighting games. It's been a similar situation with a ton of different fighters over the past few years, and this sort of business model has been what's carrying a lot of these games going forward. The one thing I'll definitely say about this business practice as I get on my old man rocking chair and spit lines like, back in my day, is the fact that this is nothing new to fighting games, even in the pre-digital era where there wasn't DLC. You go back to the 90s, the versions of Street Fighter, the different versions of almost any fighting game. If it did well at all, if it had any marginal form of success, you would see a brand new update to that game as a brand new game, pretty much, which would follow up in the next months or about a year after the launch of that game. This is very true for all the Street Fighter 3s, all the Street Fighter Alphas, Mortal Kombat games, and the list just goes on and on. If a fighting game got a decent enough amount of revenue or sales, this was bound to happen, as developers would treat fighting game updates as a brand new game and a chance to resell you on something that's a bit different with a bit more content. And it didn't make it good back in the day either. In fact, way back in the day, this is where the entire meme had come from, where, you're gonna sell us the Super Turbo Alpha EX Plus Edition. The whole reason that meme existed was that games were expensive as shit back in the day, costing upwards of $60 to $80 for a Capcom arcade game like Street Fighter Alpha 1, and then Alpha 2 would come out, which is an update for the most part to Street Fighter Alpha 1, using similar character sprites, but updating stages and mechanics. But then when you had to purchase the whole new Street Fighter Alpha 2, well, guess what? That cost just as much as Street Fighter Alpha 1, and it only came out about a year, maybe within 2 years of the last game. So this practice, like I said, is absolutely nothing new to the fighting game industry. It's pretty much how it's sustained itself for a very long time, and only some games usually go outside of the traditional norm to try to make things easier on the consumer. I can only think of certain games like Skullgirls and Killer Instinct as sort of examples to make things as easy as possible for the consumer going forward to get new characters. There are some examples. However, for the most part, this is the way it is, and it's never been ideal. It's never been consumer friendly. But here's the really terrible catch-22 about the situation, because I've been where you guys are, where I had to choose between a version of a fighting game when I was much younger in my teenage years, choose between the updated version or an older version, because I just didn't have the money to buy an updated version, like the newer version, while the older version became so much cheaper down the line. I completely understand, and I felt this when my friends did not want to play that version of the game because everyone was playing the new version. And even that small mentality still holds true to this day, because when you buy a fighting game at launch, the thing you're technically investing in isn't the hype and all the crazy amount of things that are going to be brand new and you're going to be exposed to it right as it comes out. That's the whole point of a video game's launch. The big thing you're being exposed to is the largest community at the time. The most people will be playing Dragon Ball FighterZ or whatever other fighting game would come out before future updates happen down the line. Future updates will bring people back, but man, the most people that are usually playing and the most excitement and people learning and being a part of that entire process is when a fighting game launches. So we come to a situation now where you have to make a choice, because as a consumer and economically, if you're a fighting game person and you like fighting games, it makes 110% more sense to wait about a year to 2 years after your fighting game that you're looking forward to comes out, so that you can get the definitive edition, the perfect version, the executive version, whatever the hell they're going to call it. You'll get a copy of the same exact game within a couple years after its launch, and you'll get access to all the characters, all the modes, all the different things that were added as DLC over that time frame. You're going to get for even possibly a cheaper price, maybe even $40. And this is the case for almost everything nowadays. Anything that gets digital updates, this isn't just fighting games, you're going to get a much better deal by waiting. But the catch-22 of the situation is that you essentially miss out on the launch support. You essentially miss out on being there, playing the game with everybody else. And if you're not aching to, like, playing the game online, I really don't see, like, the only thing that's motivating you is hype at that point, and kind of wanting to be around it when everyone else is and discovering everything at the same time. Seriously, dudes, if you are not looking forward to that, then I heavily encourage that for every single fighting game, even ones that I've encouraged people to purchase, like, for example, Guilty Gear Revelator about a year ago. Guilty Gear Rev 2 showed up, like, not much less than a year after that, and I felt kind of bad that, like, this is a whole nother version update that I have to buy. Well, I'm like, yes, it is, and they've been doing this forever. You just gotta kind of wait till that one goes down in price, and I feel kind of bad for recommending someone purchase, like, a game that I think is thoroughly awesome at the time, but I can't predict is going to get a crazy update in the future. All I can tell you is that predict that for every single fighting game that is going to exist, because it's gonna happen. And just because Dragon Ball FighterZ is in a situation where its DLC costs like $35 for 8 characters, while that might not be extremely price gouging in terms of like a character by character basis, it is a lot to ask on top of the original price point of the game, pretty much pulling everything to an over $100 price tag for the first year's worth of content for Dragon Ball FighterZ. And this doesn't exclude other games, like I've mentioned before, Marvel Infinite, even many other fighting games that I've been looking forward to DLC. I'm still looking forward to Dragon Ball FighterZ and those DLC characters, much less the remaining characters that are going to be announced for the game. This whole situation that we've been exposed to for the past couple of decades pretty much means that you just wait. You just wait and you're going to get the full package of the game absolutely down the line in the Ultimate, in the Revelator 2s, in the Infinite Undiscovery versions of whatever game might be out right now. And Dragon Ball FighterZ is in a similar situation once again. And I'd also say that for anybody that is put off by a practice like this, but you still are really excited by the game itself, what you do for any fighting game is just wait. If this is something that is not encouraged by you, then you need to let the developers know with your wallets, and that's how it works. By griping and complaining and doing all this stuff and then buying it anyway doesn't really change anything, and that's why this practice has been the same way for the past 2.5 decades. For me personally, I don't want you guys to take my direct example as seeing a whole bunch of different fighting games on this channel as myself directly representing those games and encouraging people to buy them. I'm in a situation that's extremely unique, that probably less than very few people on the entirety of YouTube even get to do, which is to show people fighting games, show the content that's available for those games, and then you get to make the choice yourselves, which is what a ton of people already do. People come to this channel, see some update for a fighting game, whatever it might be, and they're like, man, I don't think that looks good, or I do think that looks good, and you can make your own decision. That's a big part about me covering, much less playing a lot of different stuff that has new updates, to show you what the heck that update is and if you think it's worth your money. It takes a lot from me to tell you what to spend your money on, so I don't want to be the one to tell you what it should be. I'd prefer you to have a discussion and for you to make critical thinking about what you should be spending your money on, much less making that trade-off between the beginning early parts of a fighting game if you think the full price is worth it, versus waiting about a year, which is much better economically, to get a similar game with way more and a lot of that content that people were playing about a year ago. Let me know what you guys think about this entire situation in the comments below, much less what situation are you in? Are you driven by the excitement of a fighting game at launch, or are you one of those guys that just waits for the Ultimate / brand new edition that is usually cheaper and offers all the content everyone paid more for about a year before? Thank you a ton for watching. I'll be back with more Dragon Ball FighterZ updates as soon as possible. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.